Hey, Kelly from Quiet Speculation and Ion here. We are on site at Card Kingdom in Seattle, so forgive all the background noise. There's people walking around, floors creaking, dice rolling, cards flicking, and due to popular demand, I'm doing another battle deck video with the brand new released Spell Check. Clever name, love it. Typical Card Kingdom design, awesome logo, awesome explainer card. What we have here is a blue-red deck that cares about instants and sorcery cards in your graveyard. So I've broken the deck down into two pieces. The top row here are cards that help you fill up your graveyard. The rest are cards that either care about instants and sorceries in your graveyard or being cast. So before I go into the deck, we're going to talk about what the deck does now, how I would modify it with my own collection, and then afterwards, stick around, we're going to do a quick tour of this amazing retail location. So, diving right in, the core of the deck starts right here. These four creatures are what let the deck function. Enigma Drake and Bloodwater Entity are your core. They're your 3-cost creatures. They both have flying. They're evasive creatures, which means they put pressure on your opponent very, very quickly. Enigma Drake cares about the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard. It's got 4 toughness and power equal to the number. So if you have 2 or 3 instants or sorceries in your graveyard, then you're looking at a 2/4 or a 3/4 with flying for 3 mana. That's very aggressively costed. And this deck abuses that mechanic by getting extra cards into the graveyard, which means that very quickly you're above par. So this is a staple in the deck. Bloodwater Entity, similar card, but this case it doesn't count how many are in your graveyard, it counts how many you've cast this turn using the prowess mechanic, which you're probably familiar with. It's been prevalent in lots of recent sets. So it's a 2/2 for 3 mana, and with prowess you can easily get it to a 3/3, a 4/4, or a 5/5. Now the reason this card is extremely good in this deck is because it can put an instant or sorcery from your graveyard back on top of your deck, which means some of these cards, which we'll get to in a moment, you can rebuy them and cast them again. Your big finisher here, Cryptic Serpent, is a 6/5 for 7 mana, which would be total garbage, except for the fact that it gets cheaper for every instant or sorcery in your graveyard. So due to the way this deck is built, it's not uncommon to be casting a 6/5 on something like turn 4 or turn 5 while doing other things at the same time. You can get it down to 2 mana if you've got 5 instants or sorceries in your graveyard. 4th creature, Warfire Javelineer. It's a 2/3 for 4 mana. Again, that would be total garbage. That should cost 2 mana, but its ability counts the number of instants and sorceries in your graveyard, and then it does that much damage to a creature when it comes into play. So it's a medium-sized body and a great removal spell. It can probably kill anything your opponent has when you're casting it turn 4 or later. So moving over here, we've got more removal, Spite of Mogus. It's a 1 mana sorcery spell. It also does damage to a creature, not a player, equal to the number of instants or sorceries in your graveyard. But what you might not notice down there is the Scry 1, which means you look at the top card of your library and you can choose to keep it on top, put it down on the bottom. That helps you get to the cards you need faster. And since it only costs 1 mana, it's very easy to cast it early in the game. Now it doesn't count itself towards the instants and the sorceries. So if you've got at least 1 other in your graveyard, it can kill a 1 toughness creature and let you Scry 1. So it's very versatile, very inexpensive. Last card in this first half of the deck, Riddle Form. It's a 2 mana enchantment, which is an interesting choice for the deck considering it's not an instant or a sorcery. But it becomes clear that whenever you cast a non-creature spell, so instant, sorcery, enchantment, artifact, planeswalker, it becomes a 3/3 creature, again, with flying. So most of the creatures in this deck have flying, which means it can keep on the pressure very, very quickly. If you save your removal spells for your opponent's flying creatures, you can punch through very easily, and then their smaller creatures are going to have to contend with your Cryptic Serpents, which are absolutely huge, especially when cast early on in the game. Riddle Form also has a way you can sink your mana. For 3 mana, you can Scry 1 at any time, as many times as you can afford to do that. So again, if the game goes long, like I talked about in my previous video with the blue-green ramp deck, you need ways to use your mana, and this helps you find the cards you need in the late game to keep your engine going. So we'll talk about why I actually would not play this card in this deck in a moment, but let's first get to the enablers. Starting here, Winds of Rebuke returns anything but a land to your opponent's hand, then both players dump cards into their graveyard. So it adds 1 to your spell count in your graveyard, and then depending on what you hit with that 2 cards in the top, you might get 1 or 2 more instants or sorceries. So this could ostensibly make this guy +3 power out of nowhere. Hieroglyphic Illumination is in this deck because it cycles, which means on turn 1, you probably aren't going to have a play. Casting Spite of Mogus won't do anything, and that's the only 1-cost card in the deck. So aside from playing a land that comes into play tapped, this lets you use mana that would otherwise go to waste, and then it counts towards your count. You get towards the late game, 4 mana to draw 2 cards at instant speed. Not awful either. It helps you keep your engine going. So this card is a really, really clever inclusion. It does everything you want in one nice package. You've got 2 copies here of Is It Charm. It can counter a non-creature spell. It can do 2 damage to a creature, or it can let you draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. So it's similar to this Winds of Rebuke card insofar as it can put up to 3 spells into your graveyard to increase your count. But it's also what we call a modal spell, which means it says choose one of the following. So it's super versatile, super inexpensive, it's an instant, it's removal, it's a counter spell, and it's an enabler. This card does everything this deck wants, and the first thing I would do to improve this deck is bring this up to 4. Moving on, Geist Blast, another interesting inclusion because it's kind of got some anti-synergy, but it's very powerful. 2 damage to a creature or a player, help you finish off an opponent, help you kill a creature. It's an instant, so it counts towards your count. But then it's got this interesting clause down here that lets you copy an instant or sorcery spell by paying 3 mana and removing it from your graveyard. So the first thing I would do, like I said, I would turn these into Is It Charms because this card does everything you want, whereas this card removes itself from your graveyard, which actually diminishes your count. So I like the card in theory, but in this deck, it's got a little bit of anti-synergy, which I try to avoid whenever I'm deck building. Why would you play a card that hurts your count when you can play a card that increases your count, gives you more versatility? So I understand why they put this in, and I like it, but my personal style, I would immediately do that. So moving along, Strategic Planning. An old card that got reprinted in the Amonkhet block. Obviously, it counts towards your count. It helps you find the cards you need, and then the other cards go into your graveyard, so you can help increase that count as well while filtering cards you need. So for example, if it's turn 2 and you don't have your 3rd land, you can cast this, take the land, and the other 2 cards, maybe they're instants and sorceries, so they're bolstering your core. Great inclusion in the deck. 4 of is definitely the right number. You'd probably play 5 or 6 if you were allowed to. So that's the core. We go over to the mana base here very briefly. We've got 8 mountains, 8 islands, 1 each of these cycling lands. I don't particularly love these, but they do help the deck in the late game if they draw them and get, you get mana flooded. You draw too many lands, you can cycle this away to draw another card. You don't have anything that really costs 1 or 2 in the deck that you're going to want to cast on turn 1 or 2, so coming into play tapped, not a big deal. We've also got our dual lands here, the blue-reds. These gain you life. Again, you'd play a million of them if you could. These don't gain you life, but they do the same thing. So 6 is a good number here. I might turn these into these, just to make the deck a little more consistent, because I'd rather have the extra mana fixing, the ability to have both kinds of mana at the same time, than I would the ability to cycle. You've got enough other ways to scry and to look through your deck to find cards that you don't really need those. So it's not really a critique of the deck so much as a personal preference, and that's what makes Magic fun, is you can execute on that by just tweaking a few numbers. So briefly, I did say I would talk about other changes I would make. I just don't really like this card because it doesn't fit the riddle form. It just doesn't fit the core of the deck the way I want it to play. A 3-power creature that attacks in the air, obviously very good. The Scry, also very good. But since we only have 3 Enigma Drakes, 3 Bloodwater entities, and 2 Cryptic Serpents, the math works out perfectly to go 4, 4, 3, 4. Now we have much more cohesive core of the deck. So now the deck looks something like this. You've got 1, 2, 3, 4 enablers, 1, 2, 3, 4 core cards. Spite of Mogus is a removal spell that helps you dig through your deck, and it helps you because it gives you a greatly outsized value for its mana cost. You've got 5 or 6 instants or sorceries. A 1 mana card like this can kill just about anything your opponent plays. This is one of the Card Kingdom's newest battle decks, and this may be my favorite yet. I'm a blue-red player by heart, probably always will be. The cunning plus the fire, just kind of works out for me. Evasive, inexpensive creatures in the air, tons of removal, big finisher. This deck does everything I want it to do. So if you're thinking about picking up a battle deck, definitely look at this one. One thing to note is the deck lists are not 100% set in stone. It varies based on what they have in stock at the time, but your core is going to be more or less the same. So with that caveat, definitely think about picking this up. So real quick, we're gonna take a tour around the store, just like a little 60-second run through. This is one of the coolest retail stores in the industry. So we'll start in the trading card game room. Got this super sweet chandelier made out of black bordered basic lands from the original Magic set. Tables for FNM and other tournaments. Supplies over there. And this is the shrine to all the battle decks, the rookie decks, all the pre-constructed decks that Card Kingdom specializes in. You've got Commander, rookie decks, battle decks, tribal decks, mana base in the box, so all your guild gates, things like that. Kind of all the things you need to play kitchen table Magic and just have fun with it. So the coolest part though, obviously for me, is there's a cafe and a bar over there. At their other location, they have like the best mac and cheese in the world. But here they've got nachos, they've got craft beer, obviously because it's Seattle. And you can bring the games in, you can rent the games, and then maybe, just maybe if you're lucky, you're playing while you're eating, they might kick you a little bit of a discount to encourage you to buy the game on the spot. This is Cafe Mox. Private meeting rooms for rent if you want to game with your crew or have a meeting in a cool space. Awesome looking murals on the wall with a mouse with a sword and some lotuses on the anchor. Not really sure what that's a reference to, maybe a viewer can tell me. And then, this is it. That's the bartender and the other. What's your name?
Hi, Stephen.
Hey, Stephen. What's the most popular dish on the menu?
Most popular dish on the menu?
Don't say beer.
Always beer. Probably the Cuban or the grilled cheese.
I'll cue one of those up. So, come here, drink, eat, game, everything I ever want to do. So, quickly take a look at the main room. Nice wide open, high ceilings, brightly lit. Doesn't smell bad. All you retailers watching this, take a lesson. This is how retail is supposed to be done. Alright, so that's the battle decks, that's Card Kingdom. If you're ever in Seattle, definitely come check this place out. It's the pinnacle of retail gaming. They've also got another location in Bellevue, just across the lake, which is newer and even cooler. And like I said, that's where the mac and cheese is. So let me know what other battle decks you want me to review. I always do these. I try to do these once a week or so. And next time, I think we'll try one of the new decks, or maybe we'll do with the big red deck of dragons. Yeah, let's do dragons.